Good morning, everybody. So I just want to go back to some things that I talked about yesterday in your drawing. This is Miss Murphy, by the way. And I just wanted to kind of recap what I was talking about in terms of setting up your still life for your objects, the two objects that you're practicing from. So a couple things that I talked about yesterday were just basically setting up your still life so that you have your objects in place. I recommend using a piece of construction paper so as to kind of have, a specific area where you have your objects set up for you already. It also kind of helps you figure out the proportions and scale, especially when you're beginning with drawing, because you can kind of compare. If it's the same size paper, you can compare the positive and negative space on your other paper so that you get a better idea about your proportions and scale, and you get a little more accuracy. So I find this really beneficial, especially, as like a beginner drawing tip. And I know you're not beginners, but this is just something to kind of get us warmed up this year into drawing again. So, and when I say that too, I'm just looking and I'm comparing like the size between the scale, but the size between, the distance between where the paintbrush ends here as opposed to the paper, the size and scale between these spaces here, the positive and negative space that we talked about yesterday. So once you do that, you want to start out really lightly. That's the other thing that I talked about yesterday. Starting out really lightly, and it's okay to be sketchy. I know that sounds silly, but basically I just sort of draw out very lightly what I see. I take my time to really observe all of those areas that I need to figure out in terms of where things are. So just kind of taking my time to draw lightly. And then I can always go back in and refine as needed. So this is just a good way to figure out how to place things. And also, as we warm up into, getting into drawing again, getting scale, and proportion accuracy is something that we really want to start being aware of and mindful with. The other thing I recommended was sometimes what I do is I use little sighting techniques, such as I just use my fingers to measure, or my hand, and sometimes visually measure the distance between things like the end of this brush and get the approximate size of that. And I also like to do what's known as, I call, sighting marks, where I will sometimes, figure out, okay, the paintbrush is this long on here, so I know that I'm going to make some little marks for myself. So I made a very, very, very light mark here to figure out the placement and the size and scale of my paintbrush. I also did the same thing. I just added some little marks for myself to show the distance of my glasses here. And that is the first part that I wanted to share with you today. Also, you're just starting with your outlines. So you're starting with the contour edges lightly. I'm going to be going back into this and refining it. But once I'm done that, I'm going to start adding details, and I'm going to come back with another video to show you how I got here. And then we'll talk about our light source and observing light and dark values.